Digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello again. Once the last of the cloud and drizzle clears the south, it's a brighter day for many with some sunshine, but there will be further blustery showers across northern parts of the country, especially northern Scotland. Low pressure is departing into Scandinavia. High pressure is starting to move away from the UK, and this trailing cold front is bringing an area of cloud and some outbreaks of generally light rain and drizzle, mostly for Devon and Cornwall, and for parts of Cornwall that sticks around until the end of the afternoon. But brighter skies follow for the rest of the country with some sunny spells. 1 or 2 showers for northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but the bulk of the showers will be across central and northern Scotland, where it will continue to be windy, and those showers will be accompanied by cold air, so the risk of sleet, snow and hail for Shetland and for the hills of northern Scotland. But the showers in most places ease through the evening. 1 or 2 continue for the Northern Isles. Otherwise, it's a dry with clear skies kind of nights, and with winds dropping away. Well, temperatures will also fall, and a frost is expected in many parts. In some sheltered spots, -3 or -4 Celsius for central and southern UK, a touch of frost also for eastern Scotland, northern England. A few fog patches first thing, particularly around southern and southwestern parts of England, East Wales, into East Anglia. They'll continue into mid-morning in some spots, but then they'll lift to brighter skies. But cloud is filtering in from the northwest, and that cloud will bring some spots of drizzle over western hills and coasts, and more persistent rain in the far north and northwest. A milder day to come in the north, but a slightly colder day to come further south. And that cloud becomes more extensive into Friday evening. The winds pick up in the far north once again, and the rain turns heavy, especially for the northwest highlands, where as much as 60 to 80 millimetres is expected by the end of Friday. A windy period then for the weekend, especially in the north, with the risk of gales and further rain, at times drier further south.
And that was your weather. Welcome to On the Money, your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan, and here on GB News TV and DAB Radio for the next hour, we'll be talking about those upcoming Tory tax rises. How much would scrapping them save you? We hear from a former chairman of Barclays Bank turned Trade and Business Minister on the prospect for Britain's North East. And as ever, your emails and messages about the state of the economy as anti-COVID restrictions are eased. That's On the Money, off the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to get you up to date on GB News. Prince Andrew's lawyers have accused Virginia Giuffre of wrongful conduct in their latest attempt to dismiss the civil sex abuse case against him. They've submitted 11 reasons why they believe the case should be thrown out. The Duke of York, who's consistently denied the allegations, also wants to appear before a jury to contest the claims. The Sun's former royal correspondent Charles Ray says the outcome won't change, though, how people view him.
Despite all this posturing by both sides, the plaintiff and the defence, you've got the situation where this case could end up being settled out of court, as 97% of civil actions are settled in America. So none of it is any good. You know, at the end of the day, whatever the result is, it's not going to look well for Prince Andrew, even if he's cleared of all these horrible allegations.
Downing Street says it's still possible that Sue Gray could publish her findings into alleged lockdown parties before the weekend. The Labour Party is calling for the report to be published in full, following suggestions by some cabinet ministers that sections may be redacted for security reasons. Scotland Yard is investigating some of the alleged events, but Number 10 says Boris Johnson hasn't been interviewed by police. Leeds North East MP Fabian Hamilton told GB News Partygate means the Prime Minister should go.
My constituents, like every other MP's constituents, are sick to the back teeth of this whole Partygate nonsense. They want a resolution, and they want the man that has been at the back of this and the front of this to pack it in, frankly, because if he sets the rules for all of us, and then he breaks them willingly and knowingly, which he clearly has, and then lies to the House of Commons about it, which is against all the rules in the book, then he should resign straight away. I'm sorry.
Russia says tensions with the West over Ukraine are reminiscent of the Cold War. It comes as the US formally rejected Moscow's demand to ban Kiev from NATO. The Kremlin says remarks by the US and NATO do not give much cause for optimism, and that it's clear its security concerns haven't been considered. Former NATO Deputy Supreme Allied Commander, General Sir Richard Shiref, told GB News Putin is holding a gun to NATO's head.
Again and again, history tells us that the way to prevent wars is through deterrence and a removal of any hint of miscalculation by being determined, demonstrating a determination to be ready to defend ourselves. This is absolutely being ready to use force, of course, but it's being ready to use force in order to preserve peace. Peace is precious and we need to be very ready to defend it.
From Monday in England, there'll be no limit on the number of visitors that care home residents can receive. The Department of Health also announced changes to COVID testing for care home workers. Weekly PCR tests will be replaced by pre-shift lateral flows from the 16th of February. Plan B measures have now been scrapped in England, bringing a number of coronavirus rules to an end. Face masks are no longer required, but some retailers, like Sainsbury's, as well as transport operators, are asking people to continue wearing them. The legal requirement for NHS COVID passes to enter venues like nightclubs has also been dropped. A ceremony to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day has been held at the Bundestag in Germany. The German Chancellor, German President and Israel's President laid a wreath at the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. The ceremony remembers the millions of people who were killed by the Nazi regime. Chief Executive of the Holocaust Educational Trust, Karen Pollock, told GB News it was a defining period in human history.
May be disturbing for viewers to think about the fact that 6 million individuals, they were taken away from their homes, put in ghettos, some sent into the forests and shot and thrown into a ditch, some deported to concentration camps and death camps, straight to the gas chamber. It is unimaginable. It's very difficult for us to get our heads around.
Meanwhile, Prince Charles has described 7 portraits of the nation's last remaining Holocaust survivors as a powerful testament to their lived experience. The Prince of Wales commissioned the paintings to serve as a lasting reminder of the horrors of the Nazi regime. You are up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to On the Money and Liam.
And coming up on the money today, the tax man cometh. In April, national insurance contributions go up for both employers and employees. There's now an active campaign from within the Conservative Party Within the Cabinet, in fact, to shelve those April tax rises. What would that mean for you? Plus, we hear from the former Barclays bank boss turned minister on prospects for the North East economy. And each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview with a business leader or policymaker. Well, today, we've landed Professor Jajit Chadha. He runs the National Institute for Economic and Social Research, the UK's most influential economic think tank. And guess what? He thinks those April national insurance rises should be scrapped too. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? How do they affect you? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. I'll read out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us. This is GB News on TV and radio. I'm Liam Halligan. You're on the money. Now, as if Boris Johnson hasn't got enough on his plate, Labour now says the Tories are the high tax party. The UK's overall tax burden is at its heaviest since Labour's post-war Attlee administration just after the Second World War, not least due to the hundreds of billions we spent on lockdown support measures. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves is calling on the Tories not to go through with pre-announced rises in national insurance contributions due to kick in this April. Now's the wrong time to raise taxes on ordinary working people, Reeves says. A statement plenty of Conservatives want to hear from the Prime Minister and Chancellor Rishi Sunak as well. For weeks, On the Money's been calling for the government to scrap the VAT on household energy bills ahead of sharp rises when the new energy price cap takes effect also in April. Making household gas and electricity VAT zero-rated would save the average household around £150 a year. And now we've left the EU and the UK has full control of taxation, the government can do this at a stroke. April's NIC rises add 1.25 percentage points to the tax bills of both employers and employees, costing the average worker around £300 a year, at a time, of course, when the cost of living is soaring. Commons leader Jacob Rees-Mogg has called for this rise to be shelved, as has former Cabinet Minister David Davis, who told yesterday's On the Money that unless this happens, the Tories won't retain seats they won across the Midlands and North in 2019, and they'll lose the next election. Now expert non-political voices are piling in. The director of the highly influential Institute for Fiscal Studies says there is now, quotes, fiscal room for the government to postpone this NIC rise, given higher than expected revenues. Plus, today, the cross-party House of Commons Treasury Select Committee has issued a report saying those higher national insurance contributions might be passed on to consumers in the form of even higher prices, with workers receiving lower wages. It would be astonishing for a government to announce and then legislate for a significant tax rise, only to withdraw that rise before it's even happened. But these are astonishing times, and that's your On the Money question today. Scrapping the Tory tax rises. What would that mean for you? We're on the money, and that means grown-up conversations with people who really know their stuff. We keep saying it and showing it every day. I'm delighted to be joined by Carl Emerson. He's the Deputy Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Great to see you, Carl. Thanks so much for joining us. And in the studio, we can't keep her away. It's MissMoneyMagpie.com herself, friend of the show, Jasmine Birtles. Great to have you with us, Jasmine, as ever. Carl, let's go to you first. I can't really speak highly enough of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. In a world of sort of post-truth politics, what you guys do is look at the economic numbers dispassionately and with expertise. Your director, Paul Johnson, said that there is fiscal room to shelve these NIC rises in April if the government wants to. Could you just develop that argument a little bit?
Absolutely. I think if the Chancellor wants to delay the increase in tax, he can do that for a year, for example, to help people through the crunch when prices are going up, energy bills are going up, and indeed other taxes are going up. It would cost about £12 billion to do that for a one-year period, and I think it's be pretty comfortable for the government to borrow that much more. You wouldn't have to cut back on NHS spending for example. I think what would be much more difficult is to shelve it permanently, to get rid of the rise and never do it. And that's because, well, you've got to ask the question, why is the government putting up taxes? Why are we reaching a high level of tax burden by UK standards? And I think that's coming about because over time we're just wanting to spend more on things like health and social care, and governments are finding it harder to make cuts elsewhere. So in short, I think a 1-year delay, really not a problem if the Chancellor wants to do that. I think what would be much more difficult for him would be to do a permanent abolition of this tax rise.
Very interesting, Carl. Clearly explained as ever. What I just want to explore also with you, yes, you and I have been looking at the numbers, the tax revenues coming in. That's what the IFS does day in, day out. There is a bit more revenue, as you've said. On the other hand, if I was Chancellor Rishi Sunak pushing back, he doesn't want his tax rises shelved, that would make him look weak, then I would say, yes, Liam, yes, Carl, we have got a bit of extra revenue, but because inflation is higher, the government's got all this debt that's linked to inflation, that they are having to pay more than expected in debt interest, aren't they?
They are. On the tax side, you're right, they've collected a bit more in revenue. Actually, we got some good news earlier this week. Some very large companies have paid more tax than had been expected. That's helping the Chancellor. But we borrowed a lot of money over the last few years, and a lot of that money has been borrowed on a very short-term basis. Some of that money is linked to the RPI measure of inflation, and certainly our debt repayments there have shot up. I think the second highest month ever of repayments was seen in December. That's certainly something the Chancellor needs to worry about. I think if he was to go for a delay in the tax rise, if he was to say, well, yes, I'll do the tax rise, but I'll do it a year later, the other thing he'll have to worry about is whether in a year's time there'll be pressure coming back to delay it for another year and then another year. And of course, a 1-year delay now probably puts that tax rise closer to the next general election and potentially to a harder moment politically to put taxes up.
Lord, make me virtuous, but not yet. Just hold on there a minute, Carl. I want to turn to Jasmine Birtles, because what you really specialise in, and the theme of today's discussion, is what would these tax rises, if they're shelved, as Carl says, if they're scrapped together, mean for you? Now, before I ask you that question, let's just have a little look at a graphic that we've prepared. I think we can bring this graphic up now. Now, this graphic is from the House of Commons Library, like the IFS, an absolutely authoritative source. I'll just talk you through it. If you are on radio, just listen and I'll explain. What this graphic's showing is that the median, or the average, if you like, basic rate taxpayer, they will pay an extra £178 a year from these NIC rises coming out in April. It's quite a chunk of change, 178 quid if you're a basic rate taxpayer. If you're a median higher rate taxpayer, of course, some much higher rate taxpayers will pay more, but you'll pay an average of £715 more a year just because of these tax rises coming in April of rising NICs. And then something else, freezing tax thresholds, which also happens in April, freezing the basic and higher rate thresholds as inflation goes up, more taxes dragged in to the tax net. That will cost an average basic rate taxpayer £78 a year and an average higher rate taxpayer £237 a year. Lots of numbers, Jasmine, but I think everybody listening and watching can get the gist. It's in the hundreds of pounds. It's in almost £1,000 if you're an average higher rate taxpayer, which more and more people are as the tax thresholds get frozen. Now I've explained all that. Do you think the Chancellor will go through with this? And do you think he should?
I don't think he should. He might, as you say, politically, it could make him look weak if he goes, all right then, because he was told last year, look, you're going to have to stop the NIC rise. But we have so many price rises at the moment. Inflation is probably the most worrying thing for people across the UK at the moment, not just here, of course, in other countries as well. So we are going to be paying more anyway, as you've shown, in tax. Income tax is going up. For, say, somebody on £20,000 a year, they're going to be paying an extra £130 in NICs if it does go up. That is not to be sniffed at. And not only that...
Plus their energy bills,
yes,
Jasmine.
Exactly.
The energy price cap is going up from £1,277, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Possibly above £2,000, given spiralling wholesale gas prices too.
Exactly. And we're seeing food prices going up, and there's been a lot in the press about, the real rate of inflation, because I think that 5.4% is not the real rate of of inflation for most people.
This is the consumer price index measure, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Carl Emerson mentioned the retail price index, which ministers tell people like me, why do you keep talking about the retail price index? It's above 7%, 7.4%. And I say to ministers, I tell you why, because my train ticket increases are linked to the RPI, because government debt increases are linked to the RPI, because lots of people's phone bills are linked to the RPI. So it is a real measure.
It is a real measure. And I think, it's been shown with food prices, basics of foods have gone up by, well, more like 100%. There is a lot that's gone up. So if you have that plus, and I speak as an employer here, but employers' national insurance contributions are going to go up. So that means that quite a lot of goods are going to go up because that adds to the costs of producers.
Carl, let's go back to you. You will have been watching closely the work of the Treasury Select Committee. They're saying that employers, as and when their contributions go up, and that's scheduled for April as well, some of them may absorb that increase in employer national insurance contributions by passing that extra cost onto consumers, driving inflation. This is the Treasury Select Committee, a cross-party committee with lots of research after listening to lots of people give testimony, or it may end up in lower wages for people. Do you think this is something the government might consider to shelve the employee increase in national insurance contributions while going ahead with the employer increase?
I suspect that might be possible. I guess one reason why they may be more relaxed about the employer increase now is that the good news on employment, the good news on unemployment we've had in recent months perhaps makes you more confident that a consequence of that tax rise won't be felt in actual jobs. But that's not to say it's a pain-free tax rise. I think the Treasury Select Committee is right to point out that when you do tax rises on employers, yes, it can end up with prices for consumers being higher. Yes, it can end up with wages being lower. And if neither of those things happen, then it can quite possibly end up with investment returns being lower, which might not sound like such a bad thing until people look at their pension statements. So the money comes out one way or the other. But I do think the other consideration for the Chancellor is going to be the energy price rises and what measures might compensate people best for that. And he's got a question to ask himself, I think, about which groups does he most want to isolate, help with paying those energy bills. And a challenge with cutting national insurance contributions or not putting them up is actually that doesn't benefit those not working. It doesn't benefit, for example, pensioners. So I think he'll have other demands on the public purse for the next year, in particular looking at energy bills.
Jasmine, very briefly, this is a big political moment, isn't it? Not going through with a tax rise you've announced partly in a budget and then legislated for.
Well, true, it is. But then we are in extraordinary times. And what nobody wants is a cliff edge. And at the moment, April is looking like a cliff edge on all sorts of counts. So really, I think if we can take some of the heat out of April particularly, and this year especially, then, OK, he's going to have a few people angry at him, but the majority, I think, will go, good on you.
And unlike in the Roadrunner cartoons, when you go over the cliff edge, we can't defy gravity. Jasmine Birtles, MissMoneyMagpie.com, as ever a pleasure. And Carl Emerson, Deputy Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, thanks so much for appearing here on The Money. This is On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll be heading over to Northumberland to see the developments of the UK's first ever gigafactory, and your emails are flooding in thick and fast on this tax issue. We'll be reading some of those shortly. Stay with us. You're on The Money.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, the company building the UK's first gigafactory in Northumberland has signed a deal to manufacture its first batteries for electric cars. British Volts also secured £1.7 billion in private finance, along with the £100 million from the government's Automotive Transformation Fund. Our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney has been in Northumberland for every stage of this project, and she joins us now. There she is, our Queen of the North. Rachel, tell us more about the Gigafactory.
Liam, this is a huge vote of confidence in the northeast of England, leading the green electric revolution. The sign that we have things to come. You know, this money is incredible. 8,000 jobs this will bring to the northeast of England. There's also a sense of pride here that the UK's first gigafactory is going to be in the northeast of England, because we are built on coal mining and heavy industry. It is a complete reinvention of the region. Last night I spoke to Lord Grimstone, who's Minister for Investment, about the fact that this money is also part of the levelling up agenda, as well as the government's 10-point plan to become net zero.
Well, I think to make levelling up really sustainable in the long term, what you have to do is you have to create good quality jobs, and you have to create jobs that use the skills of local people, jobs which people are proud to do, and you then create kind of role models for huge communities, actually kind of recreating jobs there. So I think, to my mind, that's what I think is really sustainable levelling up. Of course, there's other aspects to levelling up as well, creating decent communities, giving local communities a say in what they do. But in terms of my perspective on it and my responsibilities for it, if I can get sustainable, high quality jobs into these parts of the country, which sadly have lost them in recent years, to my mind, that is what levelling up means to me.
Well done, Rachel. Good to see Jerry Grimstone, former chairman of Barclays, former chairman of Standard Life, talking to you, talking to GB News, appearing on the money. So what's the taxpayer going to get for this £100 million that's being channelled into this factory by the government?
Well, it's going to be a huge boost for the northeast of England's local economy, as well as 8,000 jobs that we do know are going to local people. I did also ask Lord Grimstone why this money wasn't invested at the very beginning. He did say that these things take time, but with me now is the UK CEO of British Volt, Peter Rolton, to talk to us about what difference this money is going to make, because we already felt like this was on a roller coaster, up full steam ahead. So what difference is this huge investment going to make?
Well, it's money from the Automotive Transformation Fund. It's public money. It does take time. The government do a lot of due diligence on our business plan and on what we hope to do here before they release the money. And that's quite right, because, of course, it is public taxpayers' money. But, we were confident right from the start. We've got a really good business plan. The need for batteries in the UK, for the UK automotive industry, is overwhelming, and we'd like government to sort the same too.
Peter, you're a Northumberland born and bred man. what does this mean for the region? A vote of confidence?
Absolutely, and it means that we can get started here now. It's unlocked the capital markets for us. We announced last week also we've been able to raise a further 1.7 billion in private money. So the government money being leveraged into private money. We can get on now and with the main construction of the factory, all 4 phases, all the associated infrastructure, and we can start to make that vision we've got for those jobs into reality.
I could see how pleased you were when you came walking towards the camera with a huge smile on your face. Where do you go? Where do you start to spend £2 billion?
Well, it's surprisingly easy when you start building gigafactories, I can assure you. But what that money does, that money goes to get all the foundations, the cabling, the pipes, the wires. It gets the building up and out the ground, and all the cladding and steel and everything. We'll have no trouble spending it, I can assure you.
The people here are talking about these jobs. What kind of worker are you looking for, and can you guarantee they're going to be local?
I can absolutely guarantee they're going to be local because it's one of the conditions in the planning permission. We readily agreed to that as part of the Section 106 with Northumberland County Council. Absolute prioritisation for local jobs. There's a commitment in there around training, apprenticeships, work placements as well. We want local people to come and train with us. There's a whole variety of jobs, everything, but they're all skilled or semi-skilled jobs. We're also going to have a programme with our foundation for people that need to do training before they actually do come and then sort of train on into some of the more skilled things. So, but yes, local people, absolute priority.
Peter Alton, thank you so much. We'll follow this Gigafactory project every step of the way. 8,000 jobs in the northeast of England. Fantastic boost, fantastic confident boost for the northeast of England. Thank you.
Rachel Sweeney there, GB News North East correspondent with the latest from that Gigafactory. Now, NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, are something regular On the Money viewers know all about, as we often discuss them. This industry, broadly speaking, the buying and selling of digital art and images, is now worth millions. But what have they got to do with sports and entertainment? Well, Capital Block is a dedicated sports and entertainment NFT agency set up to help sports clubs, brands, artists and entertainers navigate the emerging NFT business. So today we're joined by Capital Block's CEO, Tim Manuel. Tim, great to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Money. I've had a little go of it here on The Money over recent weeks and months. Just explain in a nutshell what NFTs are for people who haven't been reading the tech journals and who don't follow you on social media.
An NFT is a digital asset. It could be a video, it could be a picture, it could be a sound clip that you buy, that you own, that has a unique digital code behind it, and it is stored on the blockchain, which is a source of a digital ledger, and
Good
you
phrase.
own it.
Digital ledger. I think that's a really good way of encapsulating what the blockchain is. And of course, the blockchain is at the heart of cryptocurrencies and other ways of asserting ownership, if you like, in the digital world. Now, you've set up this agency. It's particularly focused on sports clubs, brands, entertainers, artists, bands, and so on. Tell us the kind of people you've been working with. I know you've been working with a pretty famous Turkish football club.
Yeah, so we launched Galatasaray's first ever NFT, which we sold out in 59 seconds for them, which honoured their founder. So we took an image of their founder and we created an NFT around that. And we at Capital Block, we advise not only Galatasaray, but we advise Premier League football clubs, Champions League football clubs all across Europe, but with a big focus on the Premier League at the moment. And we help them navigate this space. So we look at the assets that they have and how they could turn that brand logo, that image, that moment into an NFT to connect with the fans, because we see NFTs as the biggest tool for fan engagement for football clubs.
Now, I'm a bit older than you, Tim. I remember back in the mid and late 90s when I was starting out as a business finance journalist, everyone was talking about this thing called the internet and URLs and registering all these different URLs, website addresses. It seemed really weird to most people, small businesses thinking, well, I don't need to worry about the internet, as if anybody's going to buy a pair of shoes over the internet or something. What would you say to ordinary people, to ordinary households running small businesses? Why should they be interested in NFTs? What do they need to do about this explosion in digital art and imagery?
An NFT can cover many scopes. So art is one area. Obviously, we focus on sports, but to be able to really understand the true impact of NFT, it's going to impact every part of our life, be it ticketing, be it ownership, be it memorabilia. So an NFT is unique to you. So if you own that, you can therefore show that you are that rightful owner. So businesses can reward their customers. For example, with the football clubs, we reward our season ticket holders or the season ticket holders of the clubs. We create memberships through these NFT communities that we build. So it is going to touch every part of our life, and sports is a great way to highlight how you can create fan engagement. So for a brand, they can connect to their customers in a closer way. Same way a football club, through NFTs, they can engage with their fans in a way that's never been possible before.
That's very interesting and well put. But let me go back to my kind of middle-aged man analogy, if you like, of the internet when we thought it was nonsense. But of course, it isn't nonsense. The thing about these tech firms, people would say it's just speculative. They don't make any profits. But then you look at, Amazon's, Facebook's, Google's. People now understand what they do and why they are valuable. They used to be called just speculative investments. Now people can see these are the nuts and bolts of the digital economy, which is a big part of our future. Why are NFTs about more than just speculation? Why aren't these investments, why are they tangible? Is there something of value really there? Or is it just people piling in as prices go up?
Of course they're tangible, because you can add real-world life events to that NFT.
Okay.
So, for example, if you owned an NFT of your favourite football club, by owning that NFT, that could then unlock access to a box. For example, if you own that...
You mean like where I can actually go and watch the game?
Where you can go and watch the game. Or if you own an NFT of a shirt, they could then send you that shirt in real life as well. And then the more NFTs you collect, then you might unlock access to go and meet the players or the manager. So there's real world events that are attributed to that NFT the longer you hold it. And it's football clubs that can really lead the way with that.
And just briefly, how did you get into this? Did you get into it because you're a tech nerd, or because you're a marketing person, or you're just somebody who thinks they can see the future better than other people, which all entrepreneurs need to do, by the way?
I've been investing in crypto for the last 5 years. I have a sports business that also opened up the door to us being able to work with a lot of football clubs. And then I'm a believer in crypto and NFTs. And I see that NFTs can create fan engagement, and they're the best tool, and Capital Block is helping clubs understand how to do that, build that strategy, because at the moment football clubs really don't know where to turn, and we as an impartial agency, we help them understand that space. So that's why we got into this.
Well, it's very interesting. I know a lot of British entrepreneurs are at work in this area. All the best to you. You are Tim Manuel, the CEO of Capital Block. Thanks for appearing here on The Money. Now, thanks to all our guests today. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. And coming up, today's Money Talks is an exclusive interview. It's a biggie. It's with Professor Jajit Chadha, the Director of the National Institute of Economic and Social Research. Stay tuned for some revelations. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:34. I'm Rosie Wright, here to get you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has dismissed claims he intervened to get animals out of Afghanistan as total rhubarb. When the Taliban seized control in August last year, former Royal Marine Pen Farthing launched a campaign to get his staff and animals out. The Prime Minister has repeatedly denied approving their rescue in the final days of the mission, but a newly surfaced email shows a Foreign Office official saying that he did approve the rescue effort despite evidence proving otherwise. Downing Street says it's still possible that Sue Gray could publish her findings into alleged lockdown parties before the weekend. Scotland Yard is investigating some of the events, but Number 10 says Boris Johnson hasn't been interviewed by police. Labour is calling for the report to be published in full, following suggestions by some cabinet ministers that sections may be redacted for security reasons. Prince Andrew's lawyers have accused Virginia Giuffre of wrongful conduct in their latest attempt to dismiss the civil sex abuse case against him. They've submitted 11 reasons why they believe the case should be thrown out. The Duke of York, who's consistently denied the allegations, also wants to appear before a jury to contest the claims. Russia says tensions with the West over Ukraine are reminiscent of the Cold War. It comes as the US formally rejected Moscow's demand to ban Kiev from NATO. The Kremlin says that remarks by the US and NATO do not give much cause for optimism, and it's clear its security concerns haven't been considered. From Monday, there will be no limit on the number of visitors to care homes in England. The Department of Health also announced changes to COVID testing for care home workers. Weekly PCR tests will be replaced by pre-shift lateral flows from the 16th of February. You are up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. A short break now, and then we'll be back to On the Money and Liam.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:38. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan, here on GB News television and radio. And it's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. Now, on this show, we often talk to business leaders, but also policymakers and economists. And when it comes to economists, few are more influential or respected than Professor Jajit Chadha. He runs the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, the UK's oldest and most important economic think tank. In this wide-ranging interview, Professor Chadha argues why central bank money printing should be reined in. And he says it would be absolutely possible for the government to shelve those national insurance rises. He says it seems like a good idea. But with inflation at a 30-year high, I started by asking Professor Chadha to explain to younger viewers and listeners what high inflation is really like. Here it is. It's my latest Money Talks. We're two men of a certain age, if I may say so.
One of us may be older than the other.
We remember the 70s. We remember the early 90s. We remember double-digit inflation. How would you describe to a younger audience what happens when inflation starts getting up to 7, 8, 9, 10%? What it means for households, what it means for firms, investment and jobs? Because high inflation, it isn't just about a cost of living squeeze, is it? Which we're all now seeing is emerging and becoming a major part of British politics. It goes beyond that.
I want to make a point that is sometimes missed. And I think the control of money, or the stability of money, let me put it that way, not the control of money, but the stability of money, by which I mean, if I plan to hold a certain number of pounds, I have a certain idea in 2 or 3 years' time what goods and services I can buy with that. That's what I mean by the stability of money. It's in fact one of the primary functions of the state, along with defence and education and the provision of public services. Ensuring that pricing power of money is stabilised over time is critical. Now, you might say to me, you can't make that. Why are you making that statement? So let me go on to say what happens when you lose control of money. First, the people who get particularly hit by an inflation are those who are reliant on their income from wages alone on a month-to-month basis, which is most of us. I'm in that bracket as well. But within that, there's a large distribution of people on higher incomes and lower incomes. You and I are fortunate to have had a university education and built up our human capital and probably earning wages towards the higher end of the distribution. Many people have lower wages. That means a larger fraction of their income goes on necessities that are related to food, accommodation, and energy. And what we tend to see with an inflation is that those prices tend to go up first very quickly. So what you have is a world in which you get this shock, which is called an inflation, and it particularly hits households on low incomes that cannot move up very easily. What we've seen, for example, in the last 10 or 12 years, is that particularly those on low wages have not had their real wages. So that means the purchasing power of the wages they get.
Inflation.
Exactly, the purchase hasn't actually improved very much at all. So you're now telling them, after Brexit, after COVID, your purchasing power is going to fall even more unless we get hold of inflation. The other problem with inflation is, okay, there's a shock to some prices, but then what we also find is unless we absolutely respond in the right way, other prices want to catch up. Wages want to catch up, service prices want to catch up, and then you have a generalized inflation. And as you have a generalized and persistent inflation, the world gets very uncertain. Remember I said a few minutes ago, it's really important that when people are making decisions about savings or about what they're going to do in their careers, they have a view about how many goods and services they can buy in a year or two as a result of investment that they make or indeed the job that they decide to take. If they don't know where that's going to be, the world gets very uncertain. People can't plan. People have got to say, so why should I bother to do anything now to improve my lot, move to another part of the country, become mobile, move from London to Newcastle where my standard might be better, if I'm not sure what my purchasing power is going to be in 2 or 3 times? So what we find is that things start to slow down. Investors defer investment. They go, I don't know what return will I get in sterling in a couple of years' time. I'm going to hold back.
If you were a business leader, why would you build an extra factory? Because you don't know the value of money. You don't know the price you're going to get.
You don't know the price you're going to get, and you don't know whether you're going to be able to get the workers because it all gets very sticky. One of the problems we find is that mobility falls. Firms don't start up. There's an issue out there about firms being born. Yeah. One of the things that we've seen that maybe gives some hope as we come out of COVID is there's been a lot of firm births. So that means new people wanting to start firms. Actually, it looks like a lot of them are in the low productivity areas that we might talk about a little bit later on. But it just stops that inventiveness, that innovation.
That risk-taking that is the essence of our society, from which all jobs are created, whether in a small firm or a huge conglomerate.
That's exactly right. So that is why controlling inflation or ensuring the stability of money over time is so very important. I think we might come to this later on. As economists, we need to do a much better job of explaining that. Because one of the problems we now have, and it's actually similar to debates on even defence or other areas, because we've been successful on this issue for about 30 years, and you and I had a formative experience when we fell out of the ERM in 1992, and we thought, never again, we need to stabilise money. The next generation have no memory of that at all. That's 30 years ago this year. So they don't know what happens when you lose control of money. And we need to do a better job of explaining that. Because it looks like you're fighting the last war. You're not actually. That war still is there.
We were both studying economics at university in the early 90s, weren't we? And when the UK fell out of the exchange rate mechanism, interest rates went into double digits instantly. Firms were ruined overnight. Families... housing, their finances were destroyed. It took the Conservatives pretty much a political generation to regain their reputation for economic competence, did it not?
Yes.
So, Jajat Chadha, we've moved from a situation where we were told to think by the Bank of England and others that this inflation is transitory and we don't need to worry about it, and awkward newspaper columnists should stop highlighting it, to one now where it is widely accepted that inflation is going to be here for a while. The Governor of the Bank of England said to the House of Commons Treasury Select Committee, in terms, it's going to last 12 to 18 months, this cost of living squeeze. How high could the consumer price index measure of inflation go?
We've been looking at that intensively, as many economists have. And very early, in the middle of last year, we thought it was going to go to at least 5% this year. We're now looking at 7% in the first part of this year. And here's the really interesting thing. Even if you think it's only temporary, a temporary 7% inflation in light of a target of 2% is going to cause a significant fraction of people to think that you're not going to get to 2% very quickly. So if you take the midpoint, you could very well imagine people thinking, you know what, I'll plan around 5%, or I'll plan around 4%. They won't necessarily take the peak as what they think inflation is going to be. But it's very hard.
And so firms mark up their prices.
To 4% and 5%.
Wage bargainers push for higher wages. The inflation expectation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, so they start to expect that. They won't expect 7, but with a number as such as 7, we've had 5.2, numbers such as 7, coming into view as we go into along this year, particularly in the second quarter. You could imagine people, as you say, thinking, well, I want to hold on to my workers. I'm going to have to think about the wage rise I'm giving them. If I'm going to do that, I need to mark up, because that's a major part of my firm's costs, against that, and raise the prices of my output. Otherwise, I will be insolvent. I may not have the workers that I need, and I won't have enough money coming in order to meet the bills that I face, because the energy bills have gone up as well. That's why you get this momentum for inflation to increase.
You mentioned energy bills there, Dr. Chadha. Everyone knows that the Ofgem energy price cap is going to be raised. It's going to kick in April. The extent to which it's being raised will be announced in early February. As a point of principle, do you think there should be VAT on fuel bills?
It's
a necessity. Fuel's a necessity.
Fuel is a necessity, and we don't have VAT on children's clothing. It's an interesting question as how we might rethink some of the taxes that we have on goods that we're buying. To the extent to which energy bills are both a necessity and an intermediate good, there's maybe a question for the extent to which it should have VAT on it. VAT really should be levied on consumer goods, so the ones right at the end of the distribution. And to the extent to which energy is a large component of many other goods, there may be a strong argument for having it lower rated than other goods.
We know these extra tax rises are coming in April, coinciding with that increase in fuel bills. How unusual would it be if those extra national insurance increases, employer and employee contributions, were actually reversed before they were even implemented? This is now an active debate on the Tory backbenches because we have grown relatively quickly because of the bounce back from the pandemic collapse. We have grown relatively quickly in 2021. The Treasury's coffers, while there's lots of debt around, there is more tax revenue than Rishi Sunak thought there was going to be. That's unanswerably true, and I know your institute has been focusing on that. So it may be that these national insurance rises that were announced last year by Rishi Sunak in order to plug a hole, it may be able to reverse them now in order to address this cost of living crisis.
We didn't think at the time that they were necessary, those national insurance contributions. And to the extent to which there has been some positive news on the government's finances, it would be absolutely possible not to increase those national insurance contributions. Essentially, they are a tax on jobs. And they're a tax on jobs, particularly for lower paid employees. And in a world in which those employees have been most hit by the crisis, it's something that ought to be thought about not implementing. I think it's entirely possible to do that. And
would it be responsible to not implement those tax rises, given that we've got extra tax revenue we didn't think we were going to have, given where we are with the cost of living squeeze?
I think within the framework of understanding that there is a large amount of public debt, higher than we would ideally like it to be, that we have to think about what revenues we need to draw upon to bring that down. But remembering that ultimately it's determined by the level of growth in the economy. Didn't need necessarily to introduce those taxes at that time. There's also the question of the path of fiscal expenditure. That means the extent to which public expenditure is falling over time. And arguably, that was a little bit too tight at the time of the budget. That means there was a little bit too much expenditure being taken out of the economy. And perhaps a bit more could have been given into public investment, which we know, if appropriately allocated, I'm not talking about white elephants here, is something that can help the growth in the economy that we're talking about. And to the extent that that would be the policy choice, I think that would be preferable, because that policy mix of slightly looser fiscal policy with more public investment and slightly lower taxes would inject some demand into the economy, then make it easier for the Bank of England to raise interest rates. So something that economists often talk about is the monetary fiscal mix. And what we've had, arguably, in the last decade is a world in which monetary policy has been a bit too loose, with interest rates hovering around zero, with the Bank of England involved in the purchase of government debt. And at the same time, fiscal policy has been going through a period of retrenchment in terms of its expenditure. If we just change that mix a little bit, fiscal policy could contribute a little bit more to growth, and it would be a little bit easier for the Bank of England to raise interest rates, which would ultimately help savers and the allocation of capital around the country.
So going back to these tax rises coming in April, part of a triple whammy, if you like, inflation, higher energy bills, tax rises, are you saying that to not implement those tax rises would be possible, credible, preferable, all three?
Fiscal policy, it is very much a long-run idea. So the government has to respond to shocks, temporary shocks as they come along, use its debt policy to try and smooth those shocks so that the kind of people we're talking about, those at the bottom of the income distribution, those who face that particular shocks, don't suffer the full consequence of that shock. Fiscal policy was rightly used in 2020 to offset that. We increased public debt.
With the furlough scheme.
With the furlough scheme. And that meant that the whole of the economy was not hit as hard as it should have been. In order to use those kinds of fiscal tools, you need the credibility that in the end, fiscal policy will be righted. And what I mean by that is that debt will slowly be paid off relative to GDP. So providing you show flexibility, which might mean reducing taxes when it's appropriate to do so, but at the same time, still have a framework that's going to deliver lower public debt over time, it's perfectly possible and feasible to do that. So you shouldn't do it in isolation. That's why I go back to the point about thinking carefully about the whole set of taxes we've got, thinking carefully about the framework, and having a commitment for debt to fall over time.
Possible, feasible, but given the cost of living squeeze, preferable.
It's certainly something that would make a lot of sense.
Professor Jajat Chadha, great to see you.
Thank you very much, Liam. Lovely to see you, as ever.
Shelving those upcoming national insurance contribution rises makes a lot of sense, says Professor Jajat Chadha, the director, no less, of the National Institute of Economic and Social Research. Big news right here on the Money. You can listen to the full 30-minute version of that interview, plus dozens of other extended Money Talks interviews now on my Money Talks podcast, on the GB News YouTube channel, or via the GB News app. And now, let's hear from you. Lots of you getting in touch about what these Tory tax rises mean for you. Bill says it's much more important to get rid of fixed costs, council tax, TV licence, standing charges on energy, etc. Graham emailed gbviews@gbnews.uk to say the money hosed around during lockdown has come from borrowing. How do people think the interest on that and the capital will be paid off? The government doesn't have any money. It gets it from us, the taxpayers. We can't live on the never, never, forever. Steve contacted us to say in the 70s we had the Barber boom. We certainly did in the early 70s. The Chancellor Anthony Barber. In the 80s we had the Lawson boom, named after another Tory Chancellor, Nigel Lawson. And in the teenies we've had the Osborne, Hammond, Javid, Sunak boom. The Tory myth of being the party of fiscal competence, that's what it is, a myth. And finally, we're honoured. Publican Adam Brooks has been in touch to say he's a friend of the show. Many pubs like mine have rents linked to RPI. That's the Retail Price Index. This, coupled with the national insurance increases, VAT returning to 20%, and beer, food, wages inflation, will send many to the wall, says Adam Brooks. It's going to be a bleak year ahead. That's all we've got time for today here on The Money. Thanks so much for joining me. We'll be back for more economics, business and consumer news at 1 p.m. tomorrow. And here's a public service announcement. Next week, right here on GB News, it's Northwest Week. We're going to be on the road. Myself, our GB News political editor, Darren McCaffrey, will be presenting our shows from the northeast of England, so watch out for that next Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. GB News Northwest Week. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello again. Once the last of the cloud and drizzle clears the south, it's a brighter day for many with some sunshine, but there will be further blustery showers across northern parts of the country, especially northern Scotland. Low pressure is departing into Scandinavia. High pressure is starting to move away from the UK, and this trailing cold front is bringing an area of cloud and some outbreaks of generally light rain and drizzle, mostly for Devon and Cornwall, and for parts of Cornwall that sticks around until the end of the afternoon. But brighter skies follow for the rest of the country with some sunny spells. 1 or 2 showers for northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but the bulk of the showers will be across central and northern Scotland, where it will continue to be windy, and those showers will be accompanied by cold air, so the risk of sleet, snow and hail for Shetland and for the hills of northern Scotland. But the showers in most places ease through the evening. 1 or 2 continue for the Northern Isles. Otherwise, it's a dry with clear skies kind of nights, and with winds dropping away. Well, temperatures will also fall, and a frost is expected in many parts. In some sheltered spots, -3 or -4 Celsius for central and southern UK, a touch of frost also for eastern Scotland, northern England. A few fog patches first thing, particularly around southern and southwestern parts of England, East Wales into East Anglia. They'll continue into mid-morning in some spots, but then they'll lift to brighter skies. But cloud is filtering in from the northwest, and that cloud will bring some spots of drizzle over western hills and coasts, and more persistent rain in the far north and northwest. A milder day to come in the north, but a slightly colder day to come further south. And that cloud becomes more extensive into Friday evening. The winds pick up in the far north once again, and the rain turns heavy, especially for the northwest highlands, where as much as 60 to 80 millimetres is expected by the end of Friday. A windy period then for the weekend, especially in the north, with the risk of gales and further rain at times drier further south.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.